Hi, everyone. Welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones, and happy St. Patrick's Day. My guest today is Fran O'Connor. He is the National Director of Tolling Programs for Atkins North America, where he oversees all of Atkins tolling clients. Fran has worked closely with toll agencies across the U.S. to develop, deliver, and manage large-scale tolling programs. He has led important interoperability projects between the North Carolina Turnpike Authority and Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, between NJTA and E-ZPass, and between FTE and the State Road and Tollway Authority in Georgia. Fran has a long record of involvement in IBTTA, speaking and moderating at conferences and serving on many committees, including the Membership Committee, the Finance Committee, IBTTA Foundation Board, Interoperability Steering Committee, and much more. Most recently, Fran served as co-chief meeting organizer of the 2019 Technology Summit in Orlando and as chair of the Council of Platinum Sponsors in 2018. Fran earned a Bachelor of Science degree from St. Peter's University in Jersey City, New Jersey, graduating summa cum laude. Fran, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And sláinte to everyone who's joining us today. Yeah, well,
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
This is Café IBTTA, where we drink coffee and talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. And I thank my guest, Fran O'Connor, for this lovely Atkins mug that I'm drinking my coffee out of today. And a big shout out to all the Irish in our audience, which today includes just about everyone. Well, we are taking your questions and comments, and we want to hear from you right away. Using the chat function and selecting the option All Panelists and Attendees, please type a word or phrase that describes your feelings about St. Patrick's Day or anything having to do with your Irish heritage, real or imagined. So type your comments about St. Patrick's Day. All right, very festive, top of the morning. Bushmills or Jameson, sláinte, yeah, green beer, happy, bagpipes, the McLean clan, corned beef, yeah, we're gonna have some of that tonight. Irish sweet potatoes, soda bread, no snakes, yeah, excellent, excellent. All right, these are all great responses. I think we'll take, O'Connor's Pub. Well, that's a great segue to my first question here, Fran. So today is St. Patrick's Day, and in our religion, it's a high holy day. It's the highest of holy days. And you're in a special place, in a pub. Tell us about this pub, Fran.
Yeah, this is it's actually in my basement. I guess a couple years ago, many years ago, my sons, because you know how a local Irish pub, what it means to the Irish is friendliness, good food, good music. And so they were thinking of my two sons saying, hey, you know, we should do some type of pub down here. And they were thinking of doing something very small in the corner. And me being the true non-engineer saying, hey, you know, the 2x4s come in 8 feet. How come we just don't do a 16-foot pub? And they built, my two sons, along with my brother-in-law who was overseeing it, built this Irish pub. And, you know, and if you look in the back, we painted the top of the wall with magnetic paint. And there's pictures up there of all the parties we had down here with family and friends to make it a true, you know, Irish pub. Because everybody that knows me know I love Irish pubs because I love how it's a welcoming place. And what we wanted this to be a welcoming place for folks who came.
Well, Fran, I'm glad you went bigger because bigger is always better when it comes to an Irish pub, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, you've had friends have helped you decorate that pub with things that they brought back from their trips to the homeland, huh?
Yes, absolutely. You know, family and friends. They and some of the stuff might not be where they bought legitimately, but back in Kay's bar, we have a rugby schedule that somebody brought back from Dublin, and then different signs and where my family would bring something back, and even friends who gave us stuff that didn't go to Ireland. They just happened to go to a flea market where one George Figueredo gave me a map of Ireland with all, the royal families. Tom Delaney gave me a Guinness medal that he had, that he wound up getting. So it was in and out of Ireland. And a couple of things on this wall here, I have musical instruments where I bought a harp when I was in Galway, a drum when I was in Dublin, and the bagpipes, they came from Edinburgh. Because
Wow.
being, being in Scotland was where I got the bagpipes. So, but yeah, so everybody gave, little pieces of how we, put this in.
That's great. That's great. You have a little piece of all your friends in the
Yeah,
pub.
absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, Fran, you're a Jersey City boy. You were born and raised in Jersey City, and you went to St. Mary's Parish. Tell us a little bit about Jersey City and your childhood and your growing up there.
Well, Jersey City, and it's amazing because we moved out of Jersey City in '96, and I have to say my daughter moved back to Jersey City because when we were in Jersey City, when you're the parish of St. Mary's or St. Aloysius, where I got married to Catherine, and that was our parish, just a family and friends. You went to church and you came out. You didn't go into your cars. You stood around and you talked for probably an hour outside the church. Just, that's what Jersey City, it's all about. Growing up, and I grew up downtown, and then we moved into the West Side area. Things have changed, significantly during my time in Jersey City, and now, as you see, it's more development, where you're seeing the life come back, but you still miss those true. There's a few good Irish taverns there that they still have, where it brings that everybody. This past Sunday, they had the non-Jersey City parade because they weren't allowed to have it, but people still got together outside the bars in Jersey City, the Irish bars, just to see everybody.
Yep. Now, Fran, you got your start in the tolling industry at the New Jersey Turnpike Authority, which appropriately has a green logo, another nod to your Irish heritage. Tell us about your start in the tolling industry.
That's the Trailblazer. It's a nice green sign. I started as a toll collector. And when you talk to most people who say they were toll collectors, I collected tolls for 5 years at the New Jersey Turnpike at some of the busiest interchanges, whether it's down near the Holland Tunnel or Newark Airport. But they had a great tuition reimbursement program. So they paid for my college education. So after spending 5 years, and I have to give, you have to realize toll collectors are a bunch of people that are your first line of customer service, right? I mean, people are coming in, they're meeting them, they represent them. Back then, that's how I thought of it, as representing the Turnpike and representing New Jersey. But after, they paid for my education, I guess they figured we better promote this person because we paid a lot of money for his education at St. Peter's. It was St. Peter's College back then. Now it's a university.
Yep.
So I got my degree in accounting, and I moved into the accounting department. And it's funny, where my first job in the accounting department was, they had the old NCR accounting machines where they just, a big typewriter, it looked like, and it typed numbers. So when you had to do the financials, you had all these numbers. You had to remember what was an account receivable, what was a liability. So we converted that into a computer system, and that was probably around the 1990s. And then I moved into the engineering department, and doing electronic toll collection and bringing that up to, in New Jersey. Yeah.
Tell us, so you moved from finance to engineering, and you also, about that time, you got involved in E-ZPass, and you served as chair of the finance committee. Tell us a little bit more about your involvement in the early days of E-ZPass.
Yeah, I think when I was with the Turnpike, they said you were a toll collector, so you can get involved with electronic toll collection. So when I was in the finance department, I got involved. And becoming chair of the finance committee, we were responsible for writing the reciprocity agreement. And I have to say, it probably took us, I'd say 2 to 3 years. Rena Barter, who was the executive director of E-ZPass, had her last baby, went out on maternity leave and came back, and we still didn't have it finished. But we did get it done. And that agreement is still in place. And a lot of agencies across the country use that agreement. But going back, you look at, the finance, who was on, it was a lot of those people are retired now, from the different, and we had about 7, 8 agencies back then between the Pennsylvania Turnpike, the Thruway, the Parkway, and the New Jersey Highway Authority, Maryland Transportation Authority, and MTA Bridges and Tunnels. And I remember all those names because we worked so closely together, getting that important document done. Then I moved on to the policy committee. But back then is where, when I was with the Turnpike, we were 5 members of the regional consortium, and we turned on E-ZPass at the Garden State Parkway and the Delaware Department of Transportation.
Yep.
So that was the days when you remember, the technical folks between Stanley Chesky and JJ and Carlos Nidcock fighting it out, trying to get the technology. So it was a tough times back then.
A lot of good fighting to get things right?
Yes.
Yeah. This is Café IBTTA. Our guest is Fran O'Connor. He's the Director of National Tolling Programs for Atkins North America. And we're taking your questions. Please write your questions in the chat function and select all panelists and attendees. We want to hear from you about Fran O'Connor and his career. And while we're waiting for your questions, let's talk a little bit about IBTTA. You've been involved in IBTTA for a long time, and I want to share with you a photo, Fran, a bunch of programs and registration lists that you shared with me. Things from the ETTM workshops, if anybody can remember what ETTM stands for, the technology workshops, the Violations Enforcement Summit, and others. And those meetings meant a lot of networking and information sharing and business development. Tell us more about your involvement in all the committees in IBTTA.
I'll tell you, Pat, when we, going back, I think the first committee I was on back in the 90s was the Violation Enforcement Committee back then. But this picture that you were showing, that was when I was the co-chief meeting organizer for the technology conference in Orlando. And I said, wouldn't it be great to get all these technologies brochures? And that's only probably 1/3 of the brochures that I have from, I think my first IBTTA was back in 1989. And I said, let me just get the technology ones. And it's so funny when you go through these, how many people we see and we know that are still involved today. Where I think one of them I looked up, I was on a violation enforcement panel, and another one, it was a panel where we had integrators, agency folks, and vendors, selling equipment. And we reversed roles. So in the first part of the panel, I would have been an integrator, and I had to present how I thought an integrator was. So you saw a perspective of like what an agency thought of an integrator, what an integrated thought of an agency. But those are, how much we learned through the years there at the different conferences, Pat. It's just amazing back then. ETTM, when we were just thinking about, before that it was ABI. Saying, how do we get electronic toll collection? And I remember back on the Turnpike, the first analysis we did that New Jersey Turnpike itself will only issue 250,000 tags. That was the estimate. That was going to be a high side estimate. And we all know, that wasn't true.
We got a nice note here from Nathan West. He says, I'm sorry, David Pope. He defines ETTM, electronic toll and traffic management. Way to go, David. And Nathan West has a good question. What do you feel, Fran, are the biggest hurdles tolling will be facing in the next 5 years?
I have to, lucky Nathan doesn't work for me anymore because, but I'll let it go. I think when we go in the next 5 years, what and it's true, how we deal with, number one, just the whole infrastructure of tolling. What is it going to be like, especially, where they're saying with, the pandemic, where a lot of people are going to go, work from home, and so that's going to be less traffic. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with, people are talking now, you notice there's a resurrection of, road use and charging, because the gas tax is not coming down. So I think that's going to be a challenge for the toll agencies. What's going to happen if they do, or if the state puts in road use and charging? How does the toll agencies deal with that? But just the whole, we've been moving fast, and I think in the next 5 years, and I remember being at, the board meeting, and Tim Stewart was the president. And I said, we're not going to, and this is going back 4 years ago, we're not going to have a structure that we think we're going to have now. Even how we pay tolls, or the whole big infrastructure we have in our back offices. That's going to change. And I think that's going to be a hurdle of how we adapt to that. The one thing the pandemic has taught us, we could be mobile and we can adapt. So I think we're going to have to adapt to that to see how we do that. And I think the more we do with those, different type of payments, I think then you could see a true national interoperability of something where you just don't, focus on the technology side, but how do we, on the hardware side, but more on the technology side.
Yep.
That's going to be our biggest hurdle.
Fran, one of the things you and I talked about last week were some of the fond moments in your career in the tolling industry, and seeing projects come together. And as you were talking about it, I was thinking about that old 1980s action adventure series, The A-Team. And at the end of the show, you'd see this, fire and destruction going on, and George Papard, he would, with a cigar in his mouth, he'd say, I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that feeling, when you finish a project.
Oh, I tell you, it's unbelievable. And just a couple of projects, whether you're converting an accounting system, or upgrading a lane, but you talk about when we were going live with, I was on the private side on the DRBA, and just doing the testing, driving cars through in the lane late at night. And all of a sudden you turn it on and you see the first transactions of cars come through. It's just a feeling. First, you're like, whew, it worked. And then it's like, wow, this is a start of what's going on. And the same thing when you're doing E-ZPass. I remember New York agencies had E-ZPass working perfectly, they're moving along. And then when you start doing it on the New Jersey Highway Authority, you say, wow, we are truly moving on, with interoperability and E-ZPass. So it's an elation. It's great. You're happy for your client, and you're happy that you were part of that to do it. And on the client side, you're happy that, again, it worked.
Right.
And sometimes implementations don't work well. Where things go wrong, and you just have to make sure you correct those, or somehow correct them. But it is great when you see that.
Fran, a lot of times you see, as you work on these projects, you're competing against people who may have been who may be your friends. We talk about the tolling industry as being a small industry, in the sense that you tend to see a lot of the same people regardless of where they go. They move from agency to consultant or to vendor, and they come back again. Talk about the nature of seeing your competitors and friends in the same environment.
And the way I look at it, and I think it has a lot to do with respect. I have friends in this industry who are both competitors, who are with me on my son, Nathan West, great guy, friend of mine. He's a competitor now, but we had respect for each other and we're still friends. And I think that's what, we need in the industry. We have to make sure we have respect for each other. And I think if you have respect for each other, everything else falls into place. Whether you're a competitor, or you're on the same team, or you're a sub, it doesn't make a difference. And we go through, Kerry Witt, dear friend of mine, a competitor, was an agency. So we could go through people that are on us, but you still stay friends as long as you have the respect for each other. Competitive doesn't mean anything. And I think that's important. A lot of times when we went back, we always thought you were guilty by association. So if you were related to this firm, you're no good. And I think that has to stop. Where, my mother always taught me, you have to treat people how you want to be treated. And that's what I do. Regardless of who's your friend, you have to be treated correctly. And I think with the respect part, it's unbelievable the amount of friendships that I have made, both competitors and folks that are my colleagues. It's just, it doesn't, it doesn't bother me that you're a competitor. It really doesn't.
Fran,
Yeah.
here's a really tough question from IBTTA President Mark Compton. This will give you an opportunity to make lots of friends and enemies.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it.
Who's been your favorite IBTTA president from Zalachi through the Compton year?
Yeah. Well, my favorite current 2021 president is Mark Compton. He's
beautiful. Well done. Well
Okay.
done. Yeah. And your favorite 1999 president, maybe it was George Zalachi.
That's absolutely. He was my favorite president, But as Mark knows, and anybody that knows George Zalachi, he is my favorite, okay? Because, nobody wants to cross George, especially on the committee of finance committee. He really would kill me. So, yeah, George Zalachi is my favorite, and plus he lives in New Jersey and he knows where I live. So I just, I don't want to cross him.
That's right. George, the Godfather, right? Fran, we've asked a lot of people about the effects of COVID. You talked a little bit about it earlier, but talk to us about the effects of COVID-19, not only on you professionally, but also on your family.
I tell you, it's just funny when we, went into lockdown and I, would talk. I said, and this is in the March timeframe. And we said, this is going to be all done by August. We'll be fine. And, I was fortunate that my kids came back, they said that they had to survive. They had to come back home. So the impact has been, as it gets more and more, you look at it. And the one thing I have to say, I have to thank Catherine, because she was the glue that kept us all together, especially have to realize I traveled 80% of the time and now she's dealing with me 24/7, 7 days a week. It's kind of, and everybody knows Catherine. They like her better than they like me. So
she's your best asset, right?
My best asset. So, but it's tough in the sense that, we're used to being with people. In IBTTA, we used to be in seeing people and how much we got done seeing each other, and whether it's the board meeting in January or and that's the part that hurts, and that's the part that how we transition. Are we going to have those meetings constantly? And we might have one, we might have two. How do we think about that? And, we're an organization of, it's nice doing Zoom calls and it's nice, but being in front of somebody and, whether it's over dinner, breakfast, at a meeting, that's important. And that's the hardest part. That really is the hardest part, especially when you get a phone call and say, "Oh, when are you going to travel again?" You're like, after I get the vaccine, I'll travel again."
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part. But I have to say, I was, been lucky here with the company I work for. We adapt. Our goal was with Atkins, you still have to serve your clients. You still have to deliver. And it's amazing what we did toward it. You see some of, it's easing now in the sense of, whereas more people get vaccinated, you could start opening up the doors, so.
Right.
So
we're all looking forward to that day when we can get together and be in O'Connor's pub or somebody else's pub and raise a pint with one another. Yeah. Fran, you mentioned Catherine, and I think she's in your live in-person audience there in the pub. Tell us about how you and Catherine met.
It's a great story. I worked in a sporting goods store, and Catherine worked for one of my friends who was my former coach, Eddie Ford. And she worked for him. She worked for, we called it leisure activities, but it was Jersey City Recreation. So they were coming in to get, sporting equipment, and they needed footballs. And in this sporting goods store, I had to climb up a ladder and get the football. So I got a football and I threw it at her and she caught it. So I say she caught my pass. We went on a date, I guess, a couple of weeks after that. We're engaged 3 months later, married a year later, and we've been married for 37 years. So it's, I'm lucky she caught my pass, because if she dropped it, who knows what would happen,
On the friends and competitors, Carrie Witt says, friends first, colleagues second, competitors third. Happy St. Patrick's Day, Fran.
Yes, absolutely.
And here's a question about your 5 years collecting tolls. Do you have any funny stories from when you were a toll collector?
Well, something, whatever happens in the toll booth stays in the toll booth. And I had that agreement with, Ed Delosier, who was actually a supervisor on the turnpike, a dear friend of ours. But, there's so many things, I think the biggest thing that you come across, that why I had to get out, and it wasn't a funny story out of the toll booth, is that, and especially when you get into heavy traffic volume interchanges, people are waiting online and they're trying to get to work in the morning, and you're trying to get them to as fast as possible. So this person waited online for 15 minutes. Now they're mad at you because they feel you held them up. Now I'm mad at them because they're mad at me. So I started thinking that, God, these people hate me and I'm hating them and I don't even know them, so I think that's where the biggest thing. But I mean, you have the stories, how people were dressed, or, but I, I try to forget some of those times. When you're working at midnight at Newark Airport, you try to forget half the things you see.
Fran, you mentioned transitions a little while ago, and you mentioned to me last week that you're reading a book called Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes by William Bridges and Susan Bridges. And it seems like a very fitting time to be reading right now, with all the changes that have been thrust upon us by the pandemic and so many other changes. Talk to us a little bit about that book, Transitions, and why it appeals to you.
Yeah, transitions, and it's like the different books I read, because they always say in our younger lives, we always have to work hard, constantly work, 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 work your 18 hours a day, and as you get older, you start thinking of other things. What's more important, in a sense, what do I want to be remembered for? And Transitions, the book, transitions have three things, right? You always have an ending, and that ending might not be a finality. It might be something that ends one, and then you have a neutral zone. What do I do? And then you have a beginning on the new phase of your life. And it could be anywhere, whether it's a relationship, or, you got married young, you had kids right away, and then all of a sudden the kids are gone. You never had transition, during that time. Now all of a sudden you have another transition.
Right, right.
So that's where I think, where, and a couple of the thoughts about it, when you start thinking about, when you get into the 60s and you say, okay, what would my kids say about me? If they say, well, what do you think about your father? And you would hope they say, oh, he's a great father, great family man, great husband, taught me everything. You don't want them to say he's very hardworking, or he's at work all the time.
Right.
Providing a living is true, but you have to have the other aspects of it. So, I mean, the book just goes into different transitions in your relationships, in your work, especially now. I don't think we had closure or an ending of one transition when we go into COVID, right? All of a sudden we were there. Now, what happened what's going on? A lot of companies are saying, wait a minute, we don't need this real estate or these offices, so you might not go back to an office. You might be working from home.
Right.
So you don't have closure on, wow, I'm not going to have coffee with my friends in the morning when I'm there. So that's some of the stuff that the book goes into.
Yeah, I like that. The ending, the in-between period, and the beginning. And it sounds like you have to take each stage seriously.
Absolutely. And that's what they said, on your ending, you have to devote time to the ending. Because if you don't devote time to the ending, especially when your kids leave the house and all of a sudden you're, what is, the person that's not working, maybe wants to work now or wants to do something. So you always have to pay attention to the ending, because if you don't, it's going to come back. It's going to come back and bite you down the road. So.
Beautiful. Fran, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to come back to you for your final words of wisdom. Mm-hmm. Don't forget to complete the survey that you will receive at the end of today's program. We love to hear from you and what you'd like to hear in the future. Next week, March 24, our guest on Café IBTTA is David Mockamer. He's the Assistant Executive Director, Pike Pass and Toll Operations for the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority and Chair of IBTTA's Toll Excellence Awards Committee. Tomorrow, March 18 at 3 p.m., IBTTA's book club meets to discuss The Color of Law, a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. This book discussion is sponsored by IBTTA's Task Force on Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion. Quite a few other events coming up in the months ahead, including the Finance Summit, Board of Directors meeting, Technology Summit, and Maintenance Workshop. Visit the IBTTA website to learn about all the upcoming events and to register. And don't forget to complete the survey that you will receive at the end of today's program. Fran, what final words of wisdom do you have for us on this St. Patrick's Day?
Well, Pat, I'm going to end with the most famous Irish blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, my friends, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
Fran, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for being our guest on Café IBTTA. It was a pleasure. And to IBTTA members, be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Fran.
Everybody.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.